Let's say we get started, yeah? Excellent, excellent, excellent. Emily is going to just do a few minutes of movement, get our bodies nice and acclimated to working individually before we work in partnership. So let's all follow along with that. Oh, and also, so sorry, for those of you that don't know Emily yet, let me introduce Emily, who I've mentioned like 5 times, but this is Emily.
Hi. Good to be here.
All right, take it away.
All right. Let's stand up, everyone. And all right, let's run in place. Let's do this. So running in place, and then try to bring your knees up a little bit higher toward your chest. Look how Lux is hiding from the camera right now. Okay, now we're gonna keep our legs together, and we're gonna like twist like so. Yeah, give a little hip swivel. Good. Set the feet out wide, and then together, and wide, together. A couple more. And this time hold. Come down a little bit lower. You can reach your arms forward if that helps. And then we're just going to go up and down a few more times. Make sure you're breathing. And last one. Good. All right, so let's warm up our wrists a little bit more. So make fists with those hands. And then just twirl them around in both directions. If you haven't yet switched directions, switch now. And then bring your fingertips down to your shoulders and just do some great big circles, almost like you're touching your elbows together. And then round back behind, and forward, and around. Good. All right, let's get into the front of the hip a little bit. So 1 foot forward, 1 foot on back. Hands on hips for balance is good. And we're gonna take that back knee, we're gonna bend it slightly, and then extend that leg again. And do that a few more times. Good. And this next one, lower that knee all the way down. Extend your front leg to get into your hamstring. If it feels good for you, you can externally rotate your head, and that will turn your toes out. And then internally rotate your toes and turn in. And go back and forth. Sweet. And let's go ahead and switch sides. So step the other foot on in. And the other one forward. Hands on the hips. And then bend, raise, and lower. At least 5 times. And this next time, we're going to lower the knee all the way on down. Extend your front leg. And move from the hip. In and out. Yay. All right. Everybody feeling a little bit warm in your bodies? Thumbs up. Back. Okay.
Some of us have been warming up for the last 15 minutes or so. So if there's anything that you still need as an individual before we start to move into partnership, please don't rush into any partner move. Make sure that your body is well prepared before we start to interact with somebody else. Fair? Okay, we're going to do very similar warm-ups to what we've been doing these last few weeks. We're going to walk the plank. We're going to go through some range of motion that we've been going through, and we'll use these to not only warm ourselves up, but we use them to show a bit of compare and contrast to what it's been like in weeks previous. So we've already, for those of you that have been coming for a few weeks now, we already have a baseline of what these movements should feel like to us. And we want to see if they're continuing to get smoother. Can we make them a bit more complicated, or does that start to make the quality suffer? And do we have something else that we need to refine? And so those are things we're going to look at each time that we do these. For our front plank walks, We're going to start off with our front plank with the reverse hand-to-hand grip. Base and flyer are going to keep the arms extended and long, and we'll walk down our flyer's legs to the ankles. We're going to let that go wide. Wide goes to a tuck for the flyer, and then extends back out. We're going to do that a few times. Warm up the core muscles, warm up the hips, and start to calibrate. Then we'll hit our plank position again, and we'll walk back to the hips. From there, let's go to a side start position. So we're going to externally rotate one leg. We can take hands, or you can do this free, does not matter. I'm going to extend through the heel so that I rotate the foot and have a lot of foot on the back side of the flyer's body. And we're balanced much closer to the heel. I'm going to look at internally and externally rotating my foot. I can even take a hand and a foot on the shoulder. I'll turn so that we can see this better. And we can use the foot on the shoulder to help internally rotate the hip. And then we can take a foot to the leg to help us externally rotate. And so we can play with a little bit of internal rotation and external rotation on each side. We can switch to the second side and repeat. Internal rotation and external rotation. Cool. So front plank with the range of motion, walking down the flyer's legs, and then a side star range of motion. Should be relatively straightforward, but let us know if you have any questions. And we'll go in 3, 2, 1. From our perspective, as we're looking, it looks like people have good foot placement on the hips. It looks like the range of motion looks good. One thing that we want to encourage when we're going through these range of motion exercises is that it doesn't have to stay balanced, particularly when we're in things that are relatively safe or not in inversions. We want to look at range of motion in these balances that are safe like this as opportunities to go past what is balanceable. I got you, Kevin, 1 second. And falling shows us where the edge of our range of motion is, and then we can expand from there as we continue to practice. Question, Kevin?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Oh, great. Just a question about what is the base and the flyer thinking about to make the upper body strong when the feet are, near the other feet? Like it feels like as we're doing the movements, it's easy for the whole thing to be shifting up or down or going in and out. So what are you both thinking about to help make that more solid?
You're talking about in the front plank walks?
The front plank walk and the legs going around and forward and back.
Yeah. So from the flyer's perspective, what I'm thinking about is really looking at drawing the abdominals toward the spine as much as possible, and so that this gets nice and tightly compressed so that it doesn't have a sway through the spine. And if we unify the spine there, then we can limit the movement to being just in the legs because we're keeping the arms nice and stable. That's connected to the trunk, so as this upper body stays rigid, we can then move the lower body independently of that.
Danielle, do you have anything?
Do you have good tips for how to keep the arms like directly dead centered and not moving around while we're doing this other than just push?
There's a couple of things. From the basis perspective, we're looking at extension, so not letting the shoulders plug in, really looking at finding extension through the shoulders so that we have all of the connective tissue muscularly stabilizing. And then the flyer needs to be able to feel where the structure is from the base's wrist, where they're connected, where the flyer is actually touching, and needs to be able to figure out where the shoulder is through that connection. And the flyer can make it so that if the base starts to lose some of their stability in the underside or the top side of the shoulder, if it starts to go in one direction or the other, the flyer can help, and I would really encourage verbal, but can also physically help refine that alignment. Any other questions? Okay, great. From there, we're gonna look at the next thing that we've been playing with, which is just starting off in a star and then pretending like we're gonna go to a 4-step where we make a connection between the shin to foot. but we're then gonna see if we can set the flyer down by the base's hips and then reverse that all the way the other direction, and we're gonna tap the flyer's foot on the backside. And so flyers will open up the hips one at a time as we do that also. So flyers will go through a bit of a range of motion, figure out how to press, and the bases are gonna figure out how to scoop and bring the flyer from an inversion to an upright position using the legs independently on either side of the flyer's torso. We'll show that. Starting off in a star, flyer will present a single shin, and base is going to connect to that shin as they bend the knee on the shoulder to reach it. And then I extend the foot that's on the shoulder as the flyer brings the foot to the ground by the base's hip. And then we press into the shin, and I extend that as I bend the foot that's on the shoulder to reverse out of that. Oh, and then, sorry, on the back side, we can take and touch a reverse foot-to-foot connection so that we can play with that. And we'll go to the second side. We make connection shin to foot, and then the flyer draws through with the leg, and the base is going to bend the leg that's on the shin and keep the shoulders up, and then reverse that, bringing the shoulders low, extending the shin up, and then reaching behind, making connection at the foot, and going through that range of motion. A number of us have seen this for a few weeks, so I know that that's quite repetitive. For anyone that has seen this for multiple weeks that are seeing something new, feel free to ask questions. For anyone that is seeing this for the first time, of course, feel free and encouraged to ask questions. But we're going to go through that range of motion, looking at seeing if we can have the flyer touch the ground smoothly and increase our stability as we're working our legs independently of each other. Any questions? Okay, great. 3, 2, 1. I know. All right, that looked really nice. Again, there were a number of us that are working a little bit too much in the arms, and then I saw a lot of us really shift that into the legs again, and it looked much better. The flyers really bending the arms in that moment and not pushing the arms straight is a really positive thing for the flyers to be able to focus on. Can we show one where the arms push in the wrong axis? I'll see if I can help direct you in that. Just to give a visual demonstration of what we're seeing so that you can then, when you're experiencing it, see if you can modify in the same fashion. So in this moment here, everyone is doing a great job, great job, great job, great job, great job, all the way to the ground. It's this way back up. You see how the flyer's arms are straight? So if the flyers keep their arms straight, they push the base's arms in this direction, which loses stability. And if the flyer changes and bends the arms so that the elbow stacks in the flyer all the way to the base's shoulder, then this can push much easier into the inversion and uses the arms more efficiently, and also means that we refocus on the legs because the arms are in better alignment and not burning energy unnecessarily trying to muscle our way into this using an inappropriate, really small, ineffective muscle in that particular moment. Does that make sense? Is that a decent visual demonstration? Okay, cool. That was the most consistent thing that we saw, was just the flyer's arms extending in that moment in that axis. Cool. From there, and we'll continue to work on these each week and refine them, refine them, refine them, refine them. Eventually you'll be doing them with no hands. But until then, we're going to start to play with something else. So what we're going to look at today is a few different transitions, and we're going to be doing some balancing on hands. So I do want to make sure that the bases take good care of their wrists. The first thing that we want to take a look at here is that we're going to try to come to a balance that is a, what is it, a reverse inside star on hands. And we want to make sure that we know how to not only grip with the single arm and balance that, but how to reinforce that grip. And so the way that I reinforce that grip is that I'm holding on with my primary arm, and that's how we establish the position. And then I'm going to take my second hand and I'm going to support right at the base of the wrist and the underside of the palm my hand, so that I have two arms that are supporting the structure. Make sense?
Got thumbs up.
Excellent. So we're going to look at this starting off in a inside star. This position we call inside star. The flyer's torso is between the base's legs, and so it's inside, and we're facing each other, and so we don't say reverse because we're still facing each other. And then we're going to go to a reverse inside star on hands, and so flyer is going to take the triceps, base is going to take the hips, and we can find our reverse inside star on hands. If it feels comfortable, you can start to play with maybe releasing that grip. And if it starts to rotate, you'll say, let's solidify that.
Yeah.
And there's a number of things that we can do to solidify that. We can look at where the pressure is in the hand and the hip connection, and we can look at where the shoulders are in relation to the flyer's arms also, and the base's shoulder. And so I like to have the flyer slightly lean back so that the fingers are useful. And I'm looking to find extension through the shoulders. And then I need to make sure that if I do take my right arm out of this equation, because my flyer is connected to that right arm, I have to still stabilize it, or else the flyer, and actually let's rotate your head slightly toward my hips. So I need to make sure that that shoulder stays stable if I'm going to take this arm away. Bringing that arm back in, and we can shift to your feet. And so those will be what we're looking for, but the primary thing that we're studying is really just that balance, the connection point between the hip and the hands, and getting this well stacked. There's a few people that were in class last night. I just want to let you know we're not doing the same exact class as last night, so yeah, it'll have some similarities, but we are doing some different things. So I just wanted to say that as I wanted to see them do their little happy dance. Going from inside star to a reverse inside star on hands. Bases. When your toes are on the inside of your flyer's hip and you're rotating onto the hands, there's this moment at the end where you're going to have this temptation to really dig those toes in to help flick it onto the hands, and the flyers might be a little bit slow to get off of those feet. Please do not use your toes to direct your flyer. Bases, what we do is we flex our toes back and we use the bridge at the ball of the foot to direct, so that we're not using whatever musculature we have in the toes themselves to dig. They're really strong and incredibly uncomfortable for flyers in a lot of the parts of the body. The parts of the body are going to be up and down the arms, on the shoulders, but particularly on the front side of the hip, we have a lot of nerve endings that are coming on that front side of the hip. And so when we push into this area here, you're going to get all types of squirmy, tickle responses, uncomfortable. They will pull hairs out of your leg. You're going to get your eyes gouged out. I just can't discourage enough the idea of digging into that part of your flyer. I like some people are totally laughing. They understand the joke. Other people are like, what the fuck is he talking about? I was doing this. So let us know if you have any questions, but we're looking at going from a reverse, or going from an inside star on feet to a reverse inside star on hands. Again, let us know if you have any questions, and we will answer them. Any questions? All right, 3, 2, 1. Great job. I have to work hard to not get distracted by poor job.
I don't know.
The struggle is real. The struggle is real. Got a bag of props, just waiting. Flyers do communicate to your bases if those toes are digging in. We need to help educate verbally so that they don't think that they're comfortable until they are.
Any tips for Kevin?
Really nice, Krishna. Really nice.
Nice. I see some of you going back to the inside star too, which is good to practice.
I was just watching you, Kim and Kevin.
Can we see it from the side?
Yeah. And then one thing that I'll say, we'll show it from the side, and then one thing I'll say is that the connection point is happening too fast. There's a drop that's happening off of the feet into the arms, and so there's a little bit of a clunk. And so part of that will be that, Kim, if you bring your arm to Kevin's and let your arm help slow down that descent, and then Kevin, you're gonna have to bend those knees deeper, maybe let the knees go wide so that you can reach that hip redundantly and not let there be a gap that falls onto the hands. And then, yeah, let's show it again. You want to see it from the side. I'm going to catch with my right arm. Let's do this. Let's bring,
Lux, we talked about where on her hip you're putting your hand?
Yeah, I'm reaching past the crest of the hip so that I'm really on the side. It should feel very much like it does on feet, but it's in that side star position. But I am not on the front side at all. I'm all on the under and the back side. So you can see that there's nothing on the front side of the hip in the connection. It's all happening on the back side here. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Cool.
What's the friendliest way for the flyer to get to like dismount from that hand position? I'm getting like a wrist tweak whenever she sets her feet on the ground.
When you're going to the ground itself? So
Yes.
As I'm going to the ground, if it goes, yeah, because it's coming off of this side of your hand. So there's a couple of things I do. One is that I really take my finger to this part of my wrist, and I support that strong because that's the side that's coming off of. And so I use my fingers to really give greater extension on that side of the hand as it's coming off. So there's this like push that makes it a little bit uphill for the flyer's hip, but it protects my wrist. And so I do sacrifice a little bit of comfort for the flyer's hip to preserve my wrist. And so I give a little bit of extension there. And then the flyer can give just a little bit of push off of the arm connection to try to lift themselves off a little bit. And then as soon as they can bring their feet to the ground, you don't have to stand. So even if it just comes to like your shins, that's fine. And so it can be a lower. It doesn't have to be an up and over all the way to standing.
My question is about the transition. How flyer understand when she needs to roll on the arms? Is it base initiate or help to understand, or just commit at any moment?
Not at any moment. So we do want to make sure that the connection, that we actually are touching the hip with the hand. So we want to make sure that that connection exists before the flyer tries to help that rotation. And there's this moment where the knees of the base are bent deep. And this is going to be useful for the next things that we're doing, but where the knees are bent deep, that we create this like intermediary step that actually is its own balance in itself. And it looks like, let's do the same side we did a moment ago. And so that in this moment here, we have a single balance position here, but then this here becomes a balance position. This is a pose in itself. We're transitioning to the next thing, but we're not there yet. So this here, flyers are not rotating yet. We've just established contact. Then the base is going to extend the legs, and the flyer is going to then help with a little bit of rotation, lifting the top shoulder and the top hip up and over. Make sense? Yeah? That makes sense, Natalia? Okay, cool. So a number of years ago, I wrote a piece with Megan named Butterfly Knife. And we're going to take a look at that, not only in it of itself, but as a method of making other transitions also that we're going to play with. And so this grip isn't the same as this one. This one is quite a bit easier, where we take a grip like this. It's like a huge claw. And then this is going to be on either side of the flyer's hip that we're holding. And that's going to be very nice and stable because we have the ability to make it so that if the flyer is rotating a little bit to their front or back, that we're stabilizing it. We enter this position from, let's see, I think that this angle might work well. So we're going to enter this from a reverse inside star. I'm going to interlace my thumbs over each other, and so that comes in around the thigh, and then I have the claw on the hip. You want to talk about the flyer's grip?
Yeah, so flyers, the foot that your shoulder was just connected to, you're going to take your hands to it. You're going to kind of wrap on the outer edge of the foot, the pinky side of the foot, pulling downward.
And then from there, we'll find some extension in the base's arms, some extension in the flyer's arms, and I take the foot away from the shoulder. And as we have the connection point on the hip, just to show the grip on the back side, show the grip on the front side, and we establish our position. We are going to play with a few things in this position, but we want everyone to feel that connection point first. Go ahead and come with that. And that's a fine way to let it down is I just bring my arms over my head after I initiate, or if Emily initiates with the word down, after we've established that, it can just come to the shins. Thank you, Caroline. We'll show it again. Thank you for that comment. Very, very funny, very funny. It's good, it's good. So, any questions on the grip? We'll show it again.
Could you show the grip one more? Can you show just the grip? Like just your hand position?
Yeah. And I may have my thumbs like this, but it's like I'm gripping here.
Thank you.
Yeah. And it's upside down, so it's a little bit tough, but I'm like here on the hip. Same thing. Reverse inside star. Thumbs, and I even do start with the thumbs crossed, and then when we move into the position, my thumbs are parallel to each other, just touching each other. Cool. Any questions there? So I start off with my thumbs like this. As it rotates in, my thumbs end up there. I don't think it's going to be a detriment if you keep it like this, and I don't think it's a detriment if you start like this. So we're just looking to find a good connection on the hip with that claw grip and find the flyer extending their arms with the hook that Emily described, and the base extending their arms, trying to find tension through the flyer's body.
Yeah, so if flyers want to see that, it's kind of like the pinky side of the hands together, and then like bringing your fingers toward the center of your palm and pulling down.
Cool. All right, let us know if you have any questions, but go ahead and give it a shot in 3, 2, 1.
Which goes first? The hands to the foot, or the base's hands to the hip?
That one.
Hands to the
base's hands to the hip first. The hands to the foot is on the foot that was on the hip. It's not the foot from the armpit. So you need to make the hands go to the hip first, so that you free up the foot for the flyer's hands. What we want to do is we want to have a discussion about, and when I say discussion, I mean listen, because it's too difficult to hear everyone talk. But I'm gonna dictate a discussion, and that discussion is about how we take weight in different parts of our body as different things are happening. And so it's very common that as bases are making transitions between their legs and their arms, as they're shifting the flyer from legs to arms, legs to arms, legs to arms, as this practice so frequently does, we have our hips come off the ground for a number of these transitions. And we hear a lot of talk about making sure that we are basing with our hips on the ground so that we're not going to stress out our low back. And I want to have a discussion about when it's appropriate to have our hips off the ground, because there are times that we, in order to make certain connection points and transitions, that the hips are going to come off the ground. And so as long as the weight is in the base's arms, it's okay to have the base's hips come off the ground. As the weight moves back into the base's legs is when it's most important to make sure that the hips are back on the ground. And of course, for those of us that are looking for a little bit of additional support, we can always bolster the hips, and the hips will meet the ground sooner. And so that's always a tool that we have available to us that I can't encourage enough that we use. But I want us to now go through the same transition that we did a moment ago, but I want us to start to bring our hips off the ground intentionally. And what we're going to look at is, I'm going to pretend that you're a base here for a moment. Can you look at your spine? And so we start off with having the shoulders and the hips off the ground. As it moves to the shoulders and the hips move off the ground, we want to be able to kind of track the spine and say, okay, this is 0%, and then this is 100%, and then this is beyond 100 where we've gone too far. And so it's like, can we hit the point where the weight stays just at the shoulders and not going to the head? And we want to be able to feel each piece of that as it moves up and down our vertebrae. As the hips move off the ground, we want to use our arms, we use our arms over our head to dictate where the weight is, and we want to be able to figure out where to stop and go no further. Part of that might be a conversation that we have to have so that the flyer doesn't make any fast, erratic moves that shift the weight to the head, and that's where we can stress out our neck, and so we want to avoid that, of course. And the way that this looks is, yeah, let's do this one from the side. Is that we find the extension first, and then as a base, I'm going to lead with the arms, where I'm bringing the flyer's hips over my head, and that helps lift my own hips off the ground. And here, my head is still free. The weight is not in my head, it is on my shoulders, and I can rest my head down, but I'm just establishing that it's not there. And we can find this balance. And as long as the weight is still primarily in the arms here, it's okay to have the hips off the ground, and I'm not going to stress out my back. Go ahead, come on down. And so I want us to go through an exercise where not only do we figure it out for this particular pose, but we can start to establish what is safe and what is not as the hips are off the ground for the base. It's something that comes up all the time, and we need to have some measure of how to mitigate this in a way that isn't going to continue to stress out the back. Once we do this round, the next round will be shifting the weight back into the legs, and we'll see how to go from this position where the hips are really high off the ground, and then we'll next see how to bring the weight back into the legs in a safe way where the back is meeting the ground at the same time that the weight is coming into the legs. But first, let's establish weight off of the hips, hips into the air, and see if we can avoid going so far that it comes into the head. Does that make sense, everyone? Okay, good. I know it was a long description, but that, yeah, we'll show it again. But that was, that's a skill set that we do want every base to really be cultivating. For those of you that have done this a number of times in the past, you're welcome to go and practice now. For those of you that want, we're going to do the demonstration again, so you can stick around and watch that and then go out and practice. But we'll release those of you that are ready to go practice now to go ahead and do so in 3, 2, 1, and then the rest of us.
Orientation.
I think the last time you were facing the camera, right? So I'm here, I keep my knees together, but you can also be here, whatever aesthetic you want.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. From there, what we're gonna do is there's a cartwheel kind of action that the flyers are gonna do to bring their hips up and over into a reverse inside star on the base's leg again. And the base is gonna be giving a little bit of contact to initiate, or not to initiate, sorry, to communicate to the flyer that they can start to make the transition. And so I'm gonna show how we use that foot. And then the part that I want us to focus on is that as the weight moves back into the legs, how does the base use the bend of the knee to help bring the weight back to the hip and the extension of the arms to reinforce that. And as that happens, the hips will be rolling to the ground. And it's a timing game. All that we're really trying to do is establish a predictable and direct movement into a position, and knowing that the hips are going to hit the ground as the weight comes into the legs. And so let's see what that looks like. This way. And then actually let's start on this, because I think this will show the entrance back in better. Maybe. No, I'm gonna try. Yeah. All right. So we're in position here, and then I'm gonna take the foot. Sorry, I'll get to extension, and I'm just gonna tap the side of the hip. My foot is externally rotated, and then this tells the flyer that there's something there for them to start to cartwheel onto. They extend the leg up and over, and then we'll look at what the arms are doing to reinforce that in a second, but that's how the lower body works. And then I'm gonna do one more where I come and bring my hips into that extension, and then we'll do it from there. Okay. Which side were you on? All right. This is right. I lied. It's not. Other side. Because math. Because math. Okay. So I find my extension. I bring the foot over. The hips are off the ground, but here all of it moves back over the hip as the weight moves into the hip. And so we just want to make sure that it's all rolling downhill as the weight comes in, so that the weight doesn't come into the base's leg with the hips still off the ground. And then let's take a look at what the flyer's arms are doing. You want to talk it?
Okay, so we're here in this like counterbalance moment. Once I feel the base's foot and I begin to cartwheel, I'm pulling here. And then that turns into a push where I turn my hand down toward the foot to lift my chest up, and I can bring the foot back into the armpit.
We'll look at that again on the second side here.
Once again, once contact is made with the foot, cartwheel happens, I'm pulling, and then pushing, sorry, so low, and then guiding the foot back to armpit.
So it's nice. The pull turns into a push as it crosses the shoulder. We bring it to the shoulder and a pull. As we cross over the shoulder, it turns into a push, and then we can bring it to our armpit. And the base at this point already has established that the leg that's supporting the new hip that's been cartwheel onto is bent deep, so that the flyer is not doing this at a deficit, but we're helping them by bending that knee, making sure that the weight moves into the legs. Because if the weight is in the arms as they're trying to turn that pull into a push, it's very difficult. We want to make sure that the weight stays in the hips at that point. It's pretty common that after you try that once at a deficit, bases will bend the knee on the second one because it's way too difficult to do without the base bending the knee. So if you feel off on your first one, chances are after 2 attempts, you're going to start to modify your technique. Does that make sense, everyone? Excellent, 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 excellent. All right, let's see yours.
When you show it again, could you focus on the timing of when you push that leg up, the one that's on her hip?
Absolutely, and I'm going to give you some things to think about as you're watching it, which is that I'm extending that leg, and I'm like feeling the amount of pressure that Emily is pushing into the going from the pull to the push, And so as I feel that on my one leg, my other leg is extending in concert with the amount of pressure I feel from my flyer. So if my flyer starts to pull and then hits a weak spot where they're not following through, I don't keep extending. I pause my leg until I feel that tension come back into the flyer's arms. And as soon as the tension gets lost, my leg pauses. When the tension comes back in, my leg starts extending again. And so I'm following my flyer in that moment. You'll see it. I think let's just take a half step backwards. And maybe to further clarify that, Mike, is that I can wait to extend that leg until the very last moment. There's actually almost nothing going on in the flyer's arm on the second foot by the time I'm extending that second leg. They've done their rotation, they've established the top of their ribs parallel to the ground. It's predictably stable, and then I extend.
For some reason, we were only able to get it when I extended.
Well, you know, humans are phenomenally interesting and fascinating in all of their intricacies, nuances, and individualities. So, like, you know, we're both relatively small humans, so our proportions may dictate some things a little bit different. But you know, the only thing that I would say from a consistent standpoint is that the shoulders and the hips are either going to generally be one on top of the other. And so if I want to move one, I move the other. If I want the shoulders to go up, I move the hips down. If I want the hips to go up, I move the shoulders down. And so I'm just thinking about it as a base from that perspective of making sure that I don't have a flyer that is starting to bring the shoulders up, and then I push the legs up so much that the shoulders come back down. I want to make sure that I'm encouraging whatever movement is happening and not taking it away from them by forcing that pendulum swing from hips to shoulders in the opposite direction. And this is true for not just in these sideways ones, these are true in any plane that we're working in, that the hips and shoulders, we're almost always trying to move one to move the other. And then you can be whatever beautiful, unique little snowflake that makes it your own way. Because at the end of the day, once we have the techniques, we're all artists and we get to shape our practice how we want. So I'll give you all the techniques, and then once you have them, you make the arts.
So
All of you.
Any other questions?
Caroline, did that answer your question about the pole?
Yeah, because
Okay.
I didn't realize, like, my hands would get stuck, and then I didn't know which one I was taking off, and then my head would get stuck, and then
Yeah, totally reasonable. Cool. Okay, so what we want to look at next is moving into a different variation of this transition. So what we're going to start off with is a front plank on hands. Front plank on hands. We're going to look at being about the same place that we have our front plank on feet. My arms are pretty parallel. I do have my pinky and my ring finger that are on the side of the hips. And then I have my thumb and my index and middle finger that are along the front side of the hips. From here, we're going to find a little bit of range of motion. I extend my shoulders and we rotate in one direction and we rotate in the other direction. As that gets comfortable, we're going to rotate and I'm going to bring a foot and touch the opposite shoulder on either side. And that's what we're seeking. We're seeking to find range of motion, front plank on hands, and moving to be able to bring foot to opposite shoulder. Any questions? Rad. Prove it. What we're going to attempt to do next is make a transition from front plank on hands to that supported side star on hands that we played with earlier. Last time we made a transition going from the inside star on feet to reverse inside star on hands. And this time what we're going to do is during the rotation, I'm going to start to externally rotate one hand that is going to take the hip grip. And then we're going to see if we can make the transition to a side star and then bring the arm across to reinforce the balancing arm. So front plank on hands, I take and rotate out one hand and then shift over to side star on hands. And then it's gonna naturally continue to rotate a little bit. It might not get as much rotation as I would if I were able to place this from the ground. I may not get a full rotation. I may only get maybe 50% or 70% of the way there, and it should be enough. When we start to make transitions, we don't always get our most ideal positioning, but usually we only need a very small amount to still find balance. And if you can still find balance in that moment that isn't hurting the wrist or isn't hurting any part of the flyer, then, or of course any other part of the base, then see if you can continue to balance with less of an ideal positioning and not have it affect the balance itself. If it starts to hurt any part of either one of us, come down, reposition, look for more refinement. We'll show it again, and we'll talk about how the flyer helps the base get the arms into a good position. Maybe I'll go this way and we'll be able to show that arm better. You want to talk it?
Yeah. So flyers, I have my hands connected to forearms here. So as I start to feel the rotation, I don't break contact yet. I'm going to continue to press into the arm that's going to come off of my hip and help guide it into place. Once that connection is made, then I can take my other arm, place it over here.
And you'll see I'm not like in my most ideal grip, but this is still plenty. Make sense? If you do this and you make it a Hail Mary where the flyer is releasing the arms quickly and making the base go across, it's likely that you're going to stress out a joint somewhere in that chain. One of those joints is likely going to be either in the base's wrists, elbow, or shoulder that's going to feel it. And so flyers, be kind and be gentle and really make sure that you keep contact with the base's arms and redundantly help them bring it across. Help find additional support so that we don't feel like we have to do this free. It's going to be really advantageous for your base's arms to look for those redundancies. Any questions? Front plank on hands to inside star on hands. 3, 2, 1.
So are you changing your hand position on the hip that you keep hand contact on, or are you just like starting with it slightly rotated?
I do change that grip. It rotates as the first thing. So the flyer is pushing into the arms initially symmetrically, and I take and just peel the fingers off of the first side, the side that we're going to go to, and I rotate that around. And then the flyer makes the next transition and I reinforce. So I am rotating that hand before weight comes onto it. Or, you know, before all of the weight comes onto it.
I can't find
I'm
it.
just gonna wiggle the hips. The rest of the body just feels it, goes with it. Right, Jessica? From there, what we're going to do is we're going to look at starting to connect more of this together. We're going to look to get all the way the same transition that we did a moment ago in the butterfly knife where we had our claw grip. We're going to make the same exact transition, but instead of the claw grip, our grip is going to be our reinforced inside star grip. And we want to take in one motion, a very long motion, but go all the way from front plank to the side star to the rotation cartwheel, all in one movement. The thing that is probably the most unique about this next piece is that we don't have the same grip that we did last time in the flyer's hands on the base's foot is no longer gripped the same way. And so we're going to look at how we can use a new connection point on the hand to foot as a method to help this rotation. You want to talk about that? With your, like, turning your hand?
I'll try, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so this time, when the base presents a leg, it's the cross one. It's not the same one as it was in butterfly neck, because I'm going to reverse inside star on the leg that's currently on the ground. My hand is going to come across the top of the foot, so I'm kind of going around the pinky edge side and then pulling there. And then my other hand is going to go between my body and the base's shin, around toward the same side, more toward the heel. At this point, this is when I start to pull and do that same cartwheel action. Pull turns into a push, help elevate my chest up.
In that moment that the flyer has taken that initial grip, I'm going to use my foot to help tension and steer the direction of this uncurling rotation. And so there's a lot of moving pieces and a lot of tension that we're building into this transition. So we'll show it at least 2 more times so that you can look at different pieces of it each time.
Take that hand grip. If I have it, I pull, cartwheel, feeling a lot of tension on this side. If that tension stays, so I can push into something.
Cool. Let's show it from this so that we can see that arm side better. You only have 30 more of these, you'll be fine. So you can see the pull. I'm tensioning with that foot, bringing it diagonally across.
So flyers, if your head gets stuck at this point, sometimes you can use your other arm on the shin, push there as well as here.
And then how about one in real time? And so as this gets more refined, ideally, it starts to look like one motion. And the truth is that if we can get this so that the flyer is moving at the same time as the base, I usually can find more rotation on the hip to hand connection. And so that I don't feel like I get lost somewhere in the middle of that transition. Because it's moving with momentum, I'm able to rotate, grab, and then not feel like I have to pause there. I can allow the momentum that has already been established to lead the cartwheel part of it next. And it actually gets a bit easier once it is moving a little bit faster. Because it gets easier when we move a little bit faster, it also does become more hazardous and more dangerous in that moment. So we want this to be a slow step-by-step process so that we establish the landmarks that we're making connection points in a safe way that isn't going to spin this off onto the flyer's head. The flyer's head does dip toward the ground during this, and so we don't want to increase the inertia until we know that we have stability through it. Once stability is established, we can increase the tempo of this transition, and it will get easier. So do it the hard way, do it slow. Once that's established, you can start to increase your tempo. Make sense? After the 3rd time I said it? Excellent. All right, this will be probably our last thing that we play with tonight. So give it a shot and ask questions as you have them. 3, 2, 1.
Emily, which hand is which again? Like,
the first hand is going to come, I might need a foot.
You want to show it again?
Yeah.
In fact, we are seeing a number of people that are looking at challenges in different places. The challenges don't seem to be quite consistent, but we are seeing a few people with legs getting caught between the heads, and we're with head getting caught between the legs, and a few people that are finding orientation where the navel is not in the ideal plane. So if you want, we're going to show the demo again if you want to come in and check it out.
Okay, so I'm gonna place my hand over the top of the foot. So like my palm is for the sole of the foot. And then my fingers are wrapping around the pinky edge side of the base's foot. Then the other hand is gonna go between my body and then the base's shin around the back and connects to the heel. So my belly button does start to initially rotate up toward the ceiling, but my goal is to face my belly button away from the base. Which I'm gonna flip my hips on top of one another. So then you're getting stuck here. You can let go of one hand, connect here, push here, as well as with the other foot.
In that moment, particularly while flyers are figuring out the mechanics, I can stabilize my leg by just bracing against my own forearm here. And this gives the ability for me to bend my leg and remain stable for the flyer to figure out their mechanics. Beautiful work tonight, everybody. That was some complicated stuff. We had a number of rotations that went in different planes. We're looking at vulnerable positions for both bases and flyers in different parts of our joints, and being able to have communications where we're compassionately trying to assist each other and mitigate any of our issues is really where the best parts of this practice are going to get the greatest growths in our, not only in our communication, but also will have fallout into our physicalities. So beautiful work on what it looks like. I mean, all we can see is a lot of smiles. So if y'all are feeling scour toward each other, you're doing a great job at hiding it. We don't see any of that, really. Everyone looks like they're communicating well. They're having good attempts. Sometimes they're not working out the way that we physically have ideals of the way they should. And people are coming down with smiles and not caring if you get it. And that's the way that we want to see this practice, so that we're training our physicality, our communication, not just chasing a trick to get a transition, but really learning the techniques, like we talked about earlier, of how to transition weight back to our hips once it's on our arms, and do things in ways that will lead us to longevity in our practice that isn't going to have long-term repetitive strain injuries, and hopefully we can avoid many acute injuries as well in these practices when we have these foundations of communication, of slow progressions, and of really listening to how we can make this practice easier for each other. So thank you so much for being phenomenal models for all of that tonight. Except for the two dogs with Kim and Kev, and y'all, I don't know, like they look like they're not communicating quite as well. But maybe they're actually communicating better than all of us, who the hell knows. I stopped speaking dog a long time ago, so I lost a lot of the translation. I won't be able to tell you what they're saying. Tradition in these classes is we take a moment and we, and I will say first of all, that there are two groups tonight that had spotters, and like I've said it before, we love all of you, but we love you that are working in groups of 3 more. So yes, very well done. Take a moment, thank your spotters again, and then thank them again. And for the rest of us, hopefully we can incorporate a third or a fourth person into future weeks as we start to allow more people into our periphery even. And so take a moment and at least now thank your bases and thank your flyers. Thank you, flyer.
Yay.
Throughout the week, if you're working on this or anything else in your acro practice, we want to be resources for you, so please feel encouraged and invited to send us videos or questions of your practice, and we're happy to give diagnosis or see what we can do to help in between classes so that when we do come to class, we are going to get even more and more out of it. So reach out to us throughout the week. Let us know if there's anything that we can do to help your practice. Thank you so much, Emily.
Yeah.
And thank you all so much for being here. We hope you have a great week. Let us know if there's anything that we can do to support you, and we hope to see you all here again next week. A lot of fun. Thank you all so much. Nice to see you, Tori. And for those of you that have been listening in, great to have you, Brent and Chris and Tori. It's really phenomenal. Thanks so much for being here. And we can't wait to have people with you so that you can be observed and we can watch your practice throughout these couple of hours together also. Thank you all so much.
Thanks, Emily.
Good job.
Emily,
Thanks
we
so
love
much.
you. Lux, you're okay.
Thanks, Emily. Thanks,
So cute.
Exactly. It's so nice to see y'all. And it was really fun to watch the beginning of class when everyone was jumping around with Emily's warm-ups. It felt like you were all in my home just dancing together, and that was fucking the best. Jessica, I do have videos available. Just send me a private message and I can help get those videos to you. Anyone else that's interested in studying the videos post-class, I am recording them. Send me a message and I can help make those available to you. I do take time and like cut out a bunch of the stuff where we're just like staring at a screen and we pare it down to the instructional parts. So it's easier to watch than having to watch us just staring at a screen saying, "You look good, good job, more rotation, good."
So entertaining.
Love you, Lux. Love you, Emily. Thanks, guys.
Rochelle, it's been great dancing with you and jigging with you all night. Can't wait to see you more.
It's been my
Look at you too. You were in the shadow. I couldn't see you.
love you. Good night.
You too. Good night. So nice. Great work, everyone. That was phenomenal. Yeah.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Night.
You doing, Paula?
Do what?
Hold on.
How are you?
Okay, how are you?
Good.
I haven't talked to you in so long. I saw
know.
you last Thursday, but I didn't talk to you.
You see my little, this is what I
Yes.
try to look at when we're talking so that I'm not staring at the projector screen, that I'm looking at you.
Oh, that's so cute.
Ah.
Shiny! Did she get into the diaper cream again? Hi, cutie.
Her
Oh my
face is like, meh.
But seriously, did she get into the diaper cream again?
She's got a little. You
Got a little
cute.
Instagram face.
Hi, cutie. Oh my goodness. Oh my gosh. She's such a little replica of both of you. Cute. Hi, Nadav.
Have a good rest of your day.
Hi, Nadav. How are you?
Oh my goodness.
Nadav, are you coming to the States, you think, still this summer? Or you know?
Unmute.
You're muted. You're muted, Nadav. You're talking
Paula,
to me.
you need, yeah, there you go.
Still can't hear you. I'm
I
sure whatever you're saying is interesting. And all you can do is invite it, and you won't actually unmute them.
There's a cat.
There.
Okay. So, yeah, there's no flights right now for anybody probably until September to go as tourists, but because the kid's dad lives in Tacoma, we might be able to come because kids have the right to see their other parents.
Okay. Yeah.
So
okay.
We're still looking into it.
Right, because there's not many flights out, but there are still some, and you can get onto them. Because,
exactly.
Yeah, and you can only go to countries where you have citizenship.
Ah, okay. So maybe just with the citizenship we could come also.
Yeah, because people are allowed to travel home if there are flights out. But or at least that was the last I heard is that if you are trying to get home, that they can get you home, but there's no leisure travel or business travel.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Yeah.
Could come by boat if they don't have a flight.
Cruise? What could go wrong?
Yeah, cruise I would stay away from. I would stay away from because people are dying on cruise ships.
No lines for the water slides.
No lines for anything. There are lines that are just non-existent. I went to the airport to pick up my son last week. No lines.
Yeah, that's awesome.
It was like an empty airport. It was like the safest feeling place. Everything was super clean. He was on a plane with like almost no one.
The healthiest we've ever been since the kids have been homeschooled because they don't bring anything home anymore.
All right.
Oh, yeah. Diaper butt.
Getting the full tour. Bye. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, guys. Love you.
Bye. Love you all.
Thanks, Lex and Emily.
Thank you. Luck.
Thank you.
Oh, wait. Oh, I always do that. Oh, this isn't even the right screen. That's